In this video, I will show you how I made this scene from start to finish. We start by building the scene and create the main composition with some pre-made assets, scattering some vegetation to add details, and then we make the scene pretty with lighting, compositing and all the good stuff. And then closing with the water simulation made in LiquiGen and how to import it back to Blender to finish. It's gonna be amazing. Okay, so before I start building my scene, I actually want to talk about the assets real quick I'm gonna use for this project. It's a really simple project, so we only have 4 assets. That's it. So only these 4. And these 3 I got from Max Hayes Fantasy course as an asset pack. And this one is actually free from Max Hayes free Arch pack. Both links are in the description. Obviously, these are more high quality because it's behind a paywall, and I like using them. They're really nice. But I absolutely understand that, you know, most people don't have the money to buy courses and stuff, which is why I also use free arches in this project. For example, this. For the statue, there's also a free alternative I found on Sketchfab. Actually, I like to use Sketchfab a lot, and they are really good and free downloadable statue. You just have to type statue and then downloadable, and you will see a bunch of different statues that are similar quality. And this one is like, I mean, I had it, so I didn't model it, but it's super simple. It's just a box, extrude, insert, that's it. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is to have one of these arches. In this case, I have this arch, which is like half of an arch, and I like to array them because I want to duplicate them, and array is just the most simplest way to do this. And how many do you want to copy? In my case, I did 8. Why 8? Because then I have perfectly our arch in the middle. Why? Because I want to bend the whole thing. So after the array, we need a simple deform modifier, set to bend. And now we need to choose the correct axis. In this case, it's the z-axis. And this way we can bend it so we have a curvature of these arches. But a problem that occurs is that the bend starts at the origin point, which is not in the middle. So we need to fix this actually. And in order to fix it, I will just delete the simple deform for a second. What we need to do is we need to apply the array modifier. And now we need to go to object and then set origin to geometry. Now the origin is perfectly in the middle, and now if we then use the simple deform and then do the whole thing again, you can see that we have this nice curvature, and it's much easier to control knowing that the origin is perfectly in the middle of the whole thing, which is why I used 8 arrays. Okay, we're doing the same thing, but with this asset. This is a whole arch, so it will do the array not with 8, but this time with 5. This will be enough, because then we have perfectly one in the middle again. And then we just apply it, and then I have the machine tools add-on, so I'm just gonna use Shift S instead of this, but the same thing. And then we simple deform, bend, Z, and then let's go. To build the scene, all we got to do is just combine them, make our composition. So in my original work, I did an angle something like minus 180. And then I have for these arches, and then I have these second arches, and I put them on top of the first ones, have them about the same curvature, and place it somewhere around here. And then I noticed that this needs to be a little bit thicker, gives more just more space. So what I did was just to duplicate, instance with Alt D. Don't Shift D, you can Alt D to make instances. Then you save a little bit more resources. And then I just put it behind it, scale a little bit up, and then I think increase the curvature just a little bit to create like some sort of like a plateau. And I think I just moved this a little bit more up to create something like this. And then what I did was I was then Alt D instance this arch again, and then I have basically my main composition from the camera view. Speaking of camera, let me show you how I set up my camera actually. So for these types of animations, or especially animations, I never use the normal camera. I always use the dolly camera rig, because it allows me much more flexibility control, which I need. And you can get them by under edit preferences, under extensions, And then if you type in camera, then you should find the add camera rigs. Well, they're actually updates. I didn't upgrade, but it doesn't matter because you only need the dolly camera rig. And it functions with, it is built around with bones, so you can access them with in pose mode, just like a rig, like a normal rig. So what I would do here is actually now come here and set up my new camera for a second. So I have a camera view, and this the dolly rig is also pretty nice because in the end panel you can get access to your camera settings. So for in this case, the focal length, I want 24. This is what I use in this project. And the passepartout is super important. Make it up so you just can see your viewport, your camera view in the viewport. Otherwise I would go crazy. Anyway, so how to set up the camera actually? Well, it's actually not that difficult. It looks a bit intimidating, but trust me, this is much better to use than the normal camera for animations. So all you got to do is every time you do anything with the camera, you just go to tab and then go to pose mode. That's the only difference really. And you have 3 bones in this case. You have one is the camera itself. It's just a normal camera. It's just this handle. The camera has an aim. That's really important. And which is the big difference. So if you move your camera, it always is dependent, has constraint with the aim. And then there's a root bone, and this root bone is the mother basically of the whole hierarchy. So if you rotate and move, everything moves with it. And this is really useful, especially if you want to make like rotations around objects, and we want to have a steady rotation. So what we are using for this project, and what I'm sometimes using a lot for my other project, is to manipulate the bone structure a little bit. So we want to move the camera actually towards the back, behind the root. Then we go to the root and I press Shift S and then have the cursor to the selected. This is with the Machine Tools add-on. If you don't have the Machine Tools add-on, which I think is free or like $1 or something, it's like super cheap. It's under snapping. You can find the same thing. And the aim, Shift S, I want it to the selection. I want to go to the cursor exactly. So now we have this. And this allows me to just rotate the root, and then I have my camera just rotating with the whole thing. And that's really useful. So I'm just gonna move this root bone towards the middle of the whole thing. And then I'm gonna place my camera until I have something like this. Actually, the camera needs to, like the root bone needs to be like above, maybe something around here. And then my camera has to be a little bit more close. Okay, something like this. And now if we would animate the whole thing, what we need then to do is to come to frame 0 or frame 1, doesn't matter. And then I press I on the root bone. And then for frame 250, I would then just rotate around the Z axis, something like this. And then, oh, auto key was not on. In case you need auto key, please use auto key. And then press I again. And then we have our keyframe. And then we have an animation, something like this. Something important I want to mention. Come to the graph editor. And then under the root, under the Z rotation, you want to make sure that the curves are linear, because we don't want any like easy in, easy out, easy out of the whole thing. And this also can be a little bit faster, so we can actually go to the first frame and then G, Y, and then, you know, just move it a little bit down so we have a little bit more speed on the whole thing. This is actually pretty slow. Yeah, okay, so maybe too fast. Okay. Maybe something like this. Yeah, okay, that's not bad. That's not bad. Yeah, something like this. So this is how I would create the camera. And then what I did was and then this part was like really empty. Actually, let me deactivate the whole UI. So what I did was duplicate the whole thing again. Sorry, one of the arches, and then just move them 180 degrees. And then move them towards the front. So this way I have, yeah, perfect. So this way I have like an arch again, and this just looks nice in the composition because then we have like some sort of circle, you know. It doesn't have to be a perfect circle, you know. They never touch each other, and then if you see from above, it's like more like an egg or something. But it doesn't matter. It looks pretty nice from the camera view. This all that matters. Okay, so this is the actual geometry and the camera from the original project. You can see this like super similar to the thing I just showed you. The only nitpicky thing is like this part is like a bit better aligned with the curvature of the bottom one, and not like this what I just did in the what I just did in the tutorial. That's the only difference. And make sure that if your camera is rotated, that you're not seeing like this type of stuff. Like this is like the last frame. So that's completely fine, and this is like the first frame, so we don't have to see any strange things with the geometry. And then lastly, we just need to get our statue, put it in the middle of the whole thing. Then we can see we have our main main animation around the statue. So beautiful stuff. And then all we need to do next is the last two objects that we really need is a singular plane to act as a floor. Very simple stuff. And then we create a cylinder. 32 is enough, and then we just make it just a little bit bigger, and we want this to cover behind our arches. So something like this is perfect actually. Just shade it all smooth, go to edit mode, delete the top face so I can just see anything. Can just move this down. It can be somewhere, so it just covers the whole camera view, let's say. And then we want to add a solidify modifier to give a little bit of thickness, even though we're not going to see it in the viewport at the in the camera view at the moment. But we need this cylinder and we need this floor later as a collision object for the water simulation. This is the first job, and the second job of this is just to have just let the world end basically, because then I can just let the shadows fade here basically after the arches. Anyway, just need these two simple objects, and these are literally all geometry there is in this scene now. So these are now the final assets I use in the project. The only difference is that the cylinder is just much taller than I just did in the tutorial, and that's about it. If you just move into cycles real quick, and this is not about the lighting, it's just about the texturing at the moment. So we are gonna turn on the world. We just use like a standard HRI, and we can see that the only thing missing now is for the plane, for example, I just use the same material as the arches, and the only difference is probably if I go to edit mode of the plane. Yeah, I just scale it up just to make it to appear much smaller, and the same thing is for the cylinder. So we're gonna also use the same material as the arches, and then here same game, go to edit mode and just scale everything up. That's about it. It's dirty work, I know, but it works because you're not gonna see this area that much, especially if we have the vegetation. And for the floor, the water is above the floor, so it's not going to be visible anyway. So even though we have these repeating patterns, doesn't matter. But now let's get to the fun part. My favorite part is always lighting. So let's do the lighting. So we're gonna switch here to the world editor, not from object, but into world. And this is my old world from the actual file, and this one, let's just create a new one, call it new world. And then here under the viewport shading, make sure we activate the scene world. And at the moment you can see nothing, and that's completely correct. That's what it should be, because at the moment we only have this background node which influences the light. I'm a guy, I always like to start from 0, so no light at all basically. And for exterior lighting, so with sunlight, anything concerning sunlight, I basically always use the sky texture. the Nishita one. And if we plug this into the background and maybe turn out the strength, maybe just a little bit, and also the intensity of the light. And then the most important thing about the sky texture is that we have control over the sun elevation and the rotation. So the sun elevation, we can basically say, okay, is the sun like sunset, is it afternoon or something? And the sun rotation is for us to control the light direction. So we have more control over it, and we can create some nice shapes with light and shadow. And this is what all it's about. So first of all, this is way too bright actually, so I'm just gonna reduce this to, let's say, 1 again, and this, let's say, also 1. Yeah, that's probably about right. And I like to play also with the sun size sometimes, because as you can see, with the bigger the sun size, the softer your shadows are. Usually, if you want a sun, like a realistic sun, you will not have that like soft shadows, but I like to have the shadows not like completely zero. It's kind of like, yeah. And giving it just a little bit of softness, I think, is pretty nice. So something about 3 degrees I like to keep. You have also the ability to turn off the light if you just want ambient light. But for this, we absolutely need the light. This is literally useless. I have no idea what this does, honestly. And these 3 are very important: the air, the dust, and the ozone. It's not like super intuitive, and I have to admit I just play around them until it looks good, but the rule of thumb is that the ozone value controls how much blue your shadows are, which is really nice, because let's say you have like a really blue sky and you want the shadows to be blue, then turn that up. Then we have the dust, which controls the dark spots, so the contrast of the scene, which is also pretty nice. And then you have air, which tells you the influence of the sun, of the yellowness of the sun. It's because if you turn up air, it's always going to be yellow, and if you completely turn it to 0, and then you have like completely white and black shadows with no like color information in between. It's like even like the ozone information is gone if you do if you turn the air to 0. So it's really important to play around it. You can see this is like completely different vibe than this, for example, and this is like completely different as well. This is like the Breaking Bad Mexico filter, I don't know. So this is the sky texture that I actually use in the end. We can see that it is very yellow actually, because I turned my air all the way up to 7. But it doesn't matter, because I really like the composition of the shadow, because I wanted a part of it to be shadow and part of it to be light, like shadow, like this angular spot, whatever. It just look interesting. You can obviously do it however you want, but this is how I did it. And the only thing I added was a hue saturation value node, actually one of my favorite nodes. And then what I did was just saturation turn to 0, so I have just normal colors again. I'm gonna lose a little bit of my, blue ozone stuff, because I turned all the way 0, but you can see it still has influence of on the whole thing, just because like blue is like a darker value for our eyes, and etc, etc. Whatever. This is the lighting setup for the world that I use for this project. Next up, I'm going to show you how to turn this into this. So we are going to add some volume, which makes every render like 10 times better. I'm not even joking. And lucky for you, this is pretty simple to do. All we need is a cube. It starts with a cube. Always starts with a cube. So we just have the cube, we scale it up, so we cover the whole scene. Now everything is pitch black because, well, we have the cube covering everything. No problemo. Just go to the material, add a new material, call it volume. Maybe it's spelled correctly, but who cares? Delete the principal BSTF, Shift A, and then we're gonna search for principal volume BSTF, and then plug it into the volume of the material output. Now the default density is way too high, so we're gonna do 0.009, yeah, something like this. And then we can also like give it a little bit of a tint or something. And the anisotropy, Jesus Christ, the anisotropy is really important actually, because this controls How close this light source is affecting the fog, I don't have the perfect explanation. You know, just have to play with it to get the feeling of it. And we're gonna crank this up to a very high number, something like this, or maybe something like this. And now we have our very nice scene with some volume atmosphere inside. For your project, you can change it to a red, to a green, to a yellow, whatever. Good shit. I like it. I love it. Adding fog is always such a blessing, honestly. Just for a little bit of slice of life, I mean quality of life, is to come to the object tab of your cube, and under the visibility, on the viewport display, come to display as, and then we're gonna change it to wire or to bounce, doesn't matter in this case. And this is just for your viewport, so you have the fog visible in your render, but you still can see through your cube. Otherwise you always have to deactivate it and you're gonna not see the fog again. Disaster. Trust me, this is the way. That's good stuff. Now to finish the lighting, we're gonna add a spotlight, which is going to act like a secondary light as a supporting light. We're gonna direct it towards the middle of the whole thing, and then we are going to increase the power of it until it looks something like this. Super crazy, I know, but don't worry, because we are going to use nodes under use nodes. And here what we are going to do is we are using a texture, this node tree with this texture, to have like sort of acoustics light gobo effect. And obviously it's based on a caustics texture. So actually, if you would just plug in the caustics texture, which you can find on the internet, like just type in water caustics on Google Images and you're gonna find something similar like this. And if you plug it in, you can already see the influence of it. Looks pretty nice. And if you want to make it a little bit more fancy, just go plug in a mapping node and then a texture coded node, and from normal to vector. And you can see now you have a pretty nice looking effect. You can scale it up, you know, make it dense or not that dense. You can, you know, play around with these. If you feel fancy, you can also do like a mix vector from normal to the A vector, and then you can create a noise texture and then further influence it. It's not super necessary. I actually don't know why I did that. It's you can just ignore it, whatever. But you know, if you want to, why not? But yeah, that's the supporting light, which is going to be useful, even though it looks a little bit strange here with the cutout. But this is needed. The secondary light is needed in the end when we are going to use the water, because without the light, we are losing a lot of details and contrast where it's needed. And don't forget to always check the radius of your light. In this case, it's 0, but in the end, I think I use something like 001. Just a small change, but it's actually 10 more. It's a small change, but it's gonna change much because you're gonna influence the ray like sharpness, let's say. And I didn't want like insane sharp God rays. I just wanted a little bit softer. That's a way to do it. And next up, we are going to look at how I scattered my vegetation onto the geometry. It's going to be pretty nice with the help of the GeoScatter add-on, which is not free, but this is the best scattering add-on out there for Blender. I'm pretty sure about this, so this is why I use it. It just works for me. Don't judge me for this. But there are two possible free alternatives that you can use. One is called Secret Paint, which is a Blender extension actually, and one is called G-Scatter, not GeoScatter, G-Scatter. Okay, these are not the same thing. I have no idea how to use them. I will not cover them in this video, so if you want to look up a free alternative, please go ahead. But I am pretty sure all scattering add-ons function like based on the same system, meaning that you can still apply things I will show you now. The first step is always to gather your scattering objects. So what do you want to scatter with? In this case, I want some vegetation, I want some plants. In this case, I have 5 different plants I'm using in this scene. They are plant assets. I didn't model them myself or something. And you can get free plants, good quality plants actually, from the free plant library, which is from the guys who made the GeoScatter add-on. So this is really good stuff. It is completely free on Gumroad. I think on Blender Market it's like $1 or something. Anyway, get it. It's really a no-brainer. It's so good. I use Arborera, I use Botanic, and sometimes I still use the free assets because they are so good. This one is from Botanic, but you can exchange with any of this. It really doesn't matter. Anyway, so you have your plant assets, and I want to scatter them on the complex geometry, so in the end it looks like this, which looks pretty complex, but I can break this down in easy steps. The first step is to prepare your geometry, meaning that all the arches that you have prepared, you need to apply all of the modifiers. So simple deform, we're gonna apply this. And this we're gonna just apply all, this we're gonna apply all, this we're gonna apply all. This one doesn't have anything, and this one is duplicated, I'm sorry, doesn't have anything. Okay, perfect. So everything is applied. We apply scale just in case, you know, because something always happens if the scale is like not on 0. So scale is, so you can check that everything is like perfect. Now here's a big brain move. While this is the final geometry we are going to render in the animation. So this is the quality that we want. If you jump into Cycles, we see yeah, this is the shit. But this is not the geometry we are going to scatter on. Why? It's pretty simple, because if you go to edit mode into one of these arches, you'll see that this is dense. That's pretty dense. And we have this 1, 2, and 3, and 4 times, and the statue is also pretty dense and whatever. So if you scatter on all of these combined, it's going to be very laggy, and your computer's probably going to break. You do not want that. What you want to do is you select all of these detailed geometry that you're going to use. So these are all of them. They're inside this collection. What you're going to do is you are, actually you don't need to, because if it's in a collection, all you have to do is right click, duplicate the collection, okay? And this original collection, you just leave it for the render. And this collection, we are going to make adjustments to the geometry. The idea behind this is pretty simple, because on all of these arches that in the secondary collection that you are not going to see, because in the end we are going to turn all of this disable in the render, so it's invisible, but we're going to scatter on it, meaning we want this to be low poly as possible, but at the same time want to keep the shape of the original arch. So this is pretty dense. So how to make this undense? We go to modifiers, and then we are going to search for decimate modifier. And in the decimate modifier, all we have to do is to turn the ratio down. We can see now the face count is like absolutely crazy, like 10 million something, way too high. We do not want that. So we want now to type in a pretty small number here. And depending on your computer, this can take a little while, but this is unfortunately pretty necessary. So instead of 1, we are going to type in 0.005 for this example. Let's try it. 0.005, and like I said, depending on your computer, this can take maybe 1-2 minutes or maybe 30 seconds. Okay, this was not that long. This is too small, because if it's too small, you can see the shape's completely breaking, and we do not want that. This is not the goal. So we're going to increase it, so we have 0.05 instead of 0.05. Now this looks much better already. I would say this is actually perfect. Now we have 65,000 instead of 10 million or something. So this is pretty nice. We're going to apply it. This also maybe can take few seconds. Okay, now it's applied. You can see this is now pretty nice. Obviously the shape and everything is completely fucked, but doesn't matter, because if we go to edit mode, we can see that it is much less dense, and this is what we want, while the shape of the arches are relatively like the same basically. And now, well, you have to do it for this arch, and for this arch. So for this asset, we're going to do the same thing, 0.05, then apply it. If the shading is like completely broken, you can always go to auto smooth, so you can judge the shape a little bit better. So when you're done, it should look probably something like this. We can select everything and go to edit mode, and we can see that we can hop in and hop out of edit mode pretty easily. This is always a good indicator that this is definitely okay from your poly count. But this obviously depends on your computer. I cannot give you a guideline on this, unfortunately. I'm very sorry about that, because in the end I didn't decimate the model, the statue at all, for example, because my computer is just powerful enough for this. Anyway, next step is to select all of your geometry, the decimated geometry, and Control J it. So it's a singular object. Why do we do this? Well, this is because GeoScatter, the scattering add-on I use, you need to select the object you are scattering on. I am pretty sure that also works with any of the other scattering add-ons, and you can see in the end I use 3 scattering systems, and I do not want to like go like into this arch and then do this and do this arch and do this and do this arch and do this. I want a singular object, so I have everything in one place. This is just how the add-on works. This is why everything is Control J. So what we're gonna do is in GeoScatter, instead of using the old scatter from my real project, we're gonna use arches. Okay, well, let's rename this so it's not completely fucked. Scatter. Let's just call it Scatter 2 because I'm really creative now. Scatter 2. So now in GeoScatter we are now in Scatter 2, and we have nothing on Scatter 2 because, well, Scatter 2 is actually, we need to hide Scatter 1 so we can see anything. Sorry. So we go back to Scatter 2. We can see there's nothing because we didn't do anything. Perfect. Now a little rundown for GeoScatter. Also looks pretty intimidating, but I literally use probably 10% of the whole add-on. So I actually ignore most of the stuff I see here. The only thing I want is manual scattering, because I do not want like the biome scatter. I don't want like the density scatter where, you know, it's evenly scattered on across all of the arches. I don't want that. I want completely artistic control, how dense, where I want, and at best with like a brush system. And manual scatter is just the way to do this in GeoScatter. I have no idea how to do this in other scattering add-ons. You need to research yourself, unfortunately. So in manual scatter, I go to viewport scatter, viewport selection in this case, and then we are going back to the plant asset that we have prepared. Now I just realized that in the end I only used 3 and not 5 of them, so some of them I actually didn't use. Anyway, I know that this one is one of the most important ones, so I'm just gonna select this in the viewport, and with it's being selected, I just go to viewport selection and then I press scatter objects. Now we are gonna entering this special menu from GeoScatter, and now we can start scattering onto our geometry, and we can see this is working. Sheesh. Okay, pretty nice. In GeoScatter with F you can increase the radius of your brush, and with Control F you can increase the density, like how many assets you are scattering on. And now it's just like pure creativity, like freedom. You can just do whatever you want. You can, you know, position your camera and you can see, okay, and this is now how I would need to scatter the whole thing. This is a good time to actually hide the Scatter 2. And then we are turning on the original geometry. And now we can see the magic happening, because we can now go back to GeoScatter and we can go to this tweak. And we have the first layer of scattering system. Let's just call it, like, let's say 1. And this is the first manual scatter system. We can even hide it and unhide it to see this is like the thing. And if we want to go back to the manual scattering, we do not press here, because then we create a new scatter system here. We just select the existing one and then go to distribution and then enter manual mode. And now we are back, and then we can scatter our whole thing. And with escape, we can get off the manual mode. And this is literally how I did the scattering. Now it's just a matter of time and preference and style and whatever you want. It's actually pretty simple. There are a bunch of pretty nice things you can do in this add-on. For example, in the rotation, you can probably want a random rotation, that not everything is like completely the same. You want in the scale, you want a probably random scale, and in a default scale, for example, you can even turn like make it a little bit bigger or smaller, whatever, depending on your scattering add-on. This is all different, so it doesn't matter. I'm not going to show everything, but I'm going to show you is that so once I finish with, like, let's say these type of plants, so one of these systems is always one type of scattering plants I'm using basically. And now for the next one, let's say I want these. So I'm gonna select the new asset, come to the create, and then viewport selection, scatter objects, and then we can scatter, for example, here, and we can see this is working exactly how we want it. And then it created a new scattering system for us, and we can rename it into 2, and then we can do the whole thing again. Now here's a little neat trick, because in the decimated scatter object we're still missing the cylinder actually. So let's bring the cylinder back, and we can, like, let's say you forgot about it, let's say like in my case, I forgot about this in the tutorial. You can still manipulate the scatter object. So in this case, I want to actually merge them together. Make sure to apply the solidify modifier from the cylinder, and then select the cylinder, select the scatter, and then Ctrl J. So everything is merged together, but inside scatter 2. So we didn't change the scattering system at all. And now we can go into manual mode again, and we can see that, oh, we are now scattering on a new geometry, and we didn't need to like change anything about the scattering system at all. This is super useful, and you will probably use this a bunch of times because you will always forget something and then you can add something later. Very, very simple. Okay, so that's basically it about the scattering part. So back in the original models, you can see that this is before the scattering, and then we have 1, we have 2, we have 3 different scattering systems, and that's all there is about it, honestly. So in the next step, we are going to do the WaterSim in LiquiGen. Nice. Now, in order to get the water simulation working, we just need some collision objects from the project. In this case, we need the statue and the thing below the statue. Actually, the statue is probably not needed, but just feels nice to export it with it. And we need these arches. Yeah, just the first arches. I didn't do the second one because the less geometry you use, the smoother and the less heavy the water simulation is going to be. So I would not do this because we are not going to see it through the camera. This definitely not, you know, you don't need to export everything. And in this case, it makes sense to apply the same knowledge we did before with the scatter, which is to decimate it first before exporting. So we are going to create a new decimate modifier, 0.05. Apply shade smooth. Okay, perfect. Now we just unhide the water because we don't have it yet, right? So we can select the arch. We're gonna select the statue. We're gonna select the bottom thing. That's it. The 3 things selected. Make sure that maybe they are like you know, center, the scale is applied. And then go to File, Export FBX. Okay, now let's make a new folder for you, like LiquiGen export, for example. Now, very important, select limit to selected objects, otherwise you export everything. Stupid. And uncheck animation. It's just a good habit. Actually, I forgot about the cylinder. We need the cylinder as well. Only the cylinder. So we have a collision object like behind the arch. Otherwise, just go into infinity. And same thing, export FPS, select the objects. And this is actually pretty nice because we can call it cylinder, let's say, because it's actually pretty useful to have this separated. I will show you in a second. Okay, opening LiquiGen for the first time, ignore everything, new project. Okay, and then new project, you have like this base node setup already done. Okay, quick rundown, it's super easy. This, all of this is just like for, like if you like the appearance of the water, so it doesn't really matter that much. This is particles, particles export mesh. This we're gonna need later when we export stuff. This is the heart, the simulation. These are the forces. In this case, we only have normal gravity. If you pay attention to physics class, you know why this number is there. Then we have an emitter, which is controlled by just in primitive. We have a collider, which in this case is this donut shape. And you can see this is how it interacts. It's pretty intuitive, I would say. And there's a drain. In this case, we don't need the drain actually in this project. So delete the drain. This we need later. And that's it. In the next step, we import our geometry. We just exported. We can just take the folder and just drag and drop it. One is the arches and stuff, and one is the cylinder. Okay, so we have now this. And then we can plug the geometry into one of the colliders. And then you can already see, okay, everything is imported as we would like to have. Next up, we can delete this old primitive. We're gonna Control D to duplicate this collider, and then plug in our cylinder, and then this collider we just plug it into colliders, and then we can see now the cylinder is also here, and now we have everything that we need. Now the first step is to go to simulation, and then this voxel size. This is very, very important. We need to turn this up into a higher number, let's say 0.5, and this controls the resolution of your water simulation. So if you take our primitive from our emitter and we press play, we can see that water is now coming from the emitter, and this primitive is now controlling it. So if we make this primitive actually bigger, we can see that more water is now dropping. That's really nice. And then we can also see that it's interacting with our objects, with the arches, with the statue, and we can see the cylinder is also taking effect. So everything is working. This is perfect. This is exactly what we wanted. And now we can also see that we go to simulation, and then let's say we make it 1. So now the water is just less resolution, and the higher this number, the less resolution, but the better your performance is. In this case, we only have like thousands of particles. You can see here the stats. Now if I change this to 0.2, now we can see that, oh, now we have 10,000 of particles. My computer can still handle it, and we can see that now the water is way more realistic, and we have much more details. And obviously you can crank this even less. But there will be a time where your computer then will say, no, you need to figure it out yourself. Obviously, the smaller the voxel size, the better the water simulation is going to be. But also you're gonna pay the price with performance. Now for our case, we do not need the water to always continuously dropping down, because then our computer always needs to calculate more water. We don't need that for this project. So in the emitter, we are going to change, let me just stop it, from continuous generation, we're going to change it to fill, and then make sure that just once is checked. Now if we press play, there's only once water simulation calculated, and then it stops. Now the water at the moment is still is not getting killed basically, and this is why the performance is still bad. So we need to come to the simulation again, and then actually first of all, let's change the substeps into 1, because the more substeps, the more detailed the simulation is going to be, and substep 1 is even less intensive than 2. And then in the lifetime, we need to check simulate particle lifetime. And now if we play, the performance you can see is much better, no lag at all, perfect. In the simulation, we're gonna crank the voxel size into 0.13. This is what I used in the end actually. Substep 1, like I said, under resources, I increased the maximum volume of voxels into 100, and I did this I think to 10. The rest I didn't touch. Now I need to change a primitive shape, because we do not want a sphere. Actually, I want a cylinder. I'm just gonna reset so we can see the cylinder again. I need a cylinder, and this I need a big radius, low height, something like this. The radius needs to be much bigger, so in this case we need like something like 20. That's actually perfect. Now this has to cover the complete scene and around the cylinder. It's a little bit like cutting into the cylinder, but doesn't matter. It's still pretty perfect basically. And we need it to be somewhere like here. Now if we press play, now we can see we have water in our scene, which disappears because our life range is too low. So we need to increase the lifetime to do something like this. And now the water stays for a longer period of time, and this is what we need. Now these are in the end my real settings from the emitter. The life range, I have this number, and this is the numbers of my primitive in case you want to copy it, but this is what it is. Now you can see that I have no floor or anything. I just have this cylinder as the boundary. This is because in LiquiGen you already have the ground, and you cannot actually delete the ground from my knowledge at least. Now another thing is to come to the second collider in which you have the cylinder, and we can actually come here and then decheck the show. This allows us to preview our water much better now. The cylinder is still taking effect with the boundaries, but we are not going to see it. And this is why it's sometimes nice to, you know, have one import where it's just the arches, and then one import where it's the cylinder, because then you can hide it here on the show, which is super useful. Now we need to add more forces. At the moment we only have this gravity, but we want our water to like spin and have this like nice twist thing. So we go right click, and then we can add more forces. In this case we need a turbulence, and we also need a line force. We can see that this line force, if we plug it in, we can immediately see the effect. We can see like, damn, the water's like magically going upwards. Looks actually pretty fucking insane, honestly. And then we have this turbulence, which makes like more wavy and gives just more texture to the whole water. So in the end, this is my real line force that I use in my scene. We can see that we have a push strength of 0, a twist strength of 0.3, very important. We have a negative repel strength, and I think that's about it. You can just copy these values if you want to, and then you have something like this, which is kind of like this twist and then whirlpool in the middle, and like it has a sinkhole or something. Really nice. And then this turbulence we plug into the forces as well. This is the final turbulence, and these are the values, so you can just copy them. Just a nice texture basically, like in Blender. And then we have this combined, and then when we play the simulation for a couple of frames, we can now see that, okay, now this is taking effect. Sometimes you need to just wait like, I don't know, 1,000 or 2,000 of frames to really see the effect. And then you can then also say then in the export to say which frame you're starting to export, because let's say I want to frame like 1000 or 960. I think this looks pretty nice. Then we can say, okay, from 960 onwards, export me like 500 frames. And this is then how I would do it. Now the last step before we export is the white water. For that we need the white water node. It should be in the default scene, and then we just plug it in. And then with the default settings, your white water with the simulation should look something like this. Suddenly now you get all the juicy details. This is exactly what we want. But in this case, this is way too much actually. Even though it looks pretty nice in LiquiGen, but you need to realize that all of these particles you need to export in Blender, and then your performance will be atrocious. So we need to, you know, just lower the whole complexity, but it will still look good in Blender, don't get me wrong. But it will not like beat this detail, because just the performance just not worth it, in my opinion. Anyway, we are deleting the spray and the bubbles. We only need the foam. This is the first step. And then we can see that already it's much lower, and in this case only these small particles. And inside the appearance we can increase the radius of it just a little bit, so we can just see better and have a better judgment on how many particles we need, because like I said, the less particles the better. In this case this is way too much, and this will completely kill my Blender. So in the end, this is now my final white water from the real project. These are the numbers. You can just copy them if you want the same. I suggest you do it because it's, I think, pretty optimized and it's not too much, let's say. But the most important thing is just delete spray, delete bubbles, then you already erase a lot of stuff. The foam radius does not matter at all for Blender, because in Blender we need to convert these particles with geonodes, and then we can set our own radius in Blender. This is just for LiquiGen, and yeah, these are the settings that you need to copy. So now we have the white water, we have the whole water simulation. This looks pretty nice, honestly, very sexy. And next step would be to export the whole thing and then import it into Blender. For the export, we do not need the export VDB. We only need the mesh and the particles. For the mesh, our first frame is going to be 800, and then the number of frames are going to be 500. And the particles is the same, first frame 800, and the number of frames are 500. Now there's something special, because in LiquiGen, the simulation is running with 60 Hertz, which you can basically say is just 60 FPS, because this is optimized for games, not for like VFX and Blender, whatever. In Blender, my animation is with 25 FPS, not with 60. So actually we need, in the export, we need to change this frame stride to 2. And then in the simulation, we turn this into 50. Okay, just let me explain for 1 second. The step rate, 60 is like the normal operational hertz. Anything other than 60 is not like, let's say, optimal for LiquiGen. But 50 is like very close to 60, so this is no problem. And the frame stride, there's like a formula, which is like the step rate divided by the frame stride. This should equal your FPS in Blender. In this case, we have 50 and 2, meaning that it should be optimized then for 25 FPS. And then all you need to do now for the particles is to enable only the foam, and then in the mesh it doesn't matter. And now we just choose the directory. Then here also choose the directory. But if you then chose wherever you want to save, and then you, for example, now press export, then everything is going to be exported. And the good thing about LiquiGen is that everything is GPU based and is pretty fast. So once it reaches the frame that you typed, in this case it will be 800, which will be right now, then you can see it's already exporting, and the whole thing it's only going to take like 3 or 5 minutes. It's crazy. This is why I use LiquiGen, because it's just so fast. Like, do this in default Blender, you're gonna, yeah. Okay, now to import everything, we just go to File, Import, and then Alembic, ABC. And here are our 2 files. One is the water mesh and one is the particle mesh. These are the final ones I actually use in my project. If you import them, make sure that set frame range is off. This is really important. And then you can just import both of them. Okay, now they are imported and you can see this is working. So we have the particles and we have the mesh. And if we then maybe change the timeline to another frame, we can see that the water and everything, it is changing with it. The performance is unbelievably bad, but this is normal. It's just how it is. And we will now, first of all, hide the foam, the particles, and make some adjustments for the water. Actually, one thing I'd like to mention now is if I disable something, I disable in the viewport, not just hide it in the viewport. You can find these extra settings with this button, and then you can activate and deactivate this. I normally have everything on. I don't know why in default you only have this, and this is kind of useless, because if you just hide it in the viewport, the performance is still gonna be ass. But if you hide it in the disable in the viewport, I'm sorry, then everything is like really like it wouldn't exist basically. The same thing is if you exclude it from the view layer, just deactivate the collection, then the performance will always also be pretty good. It's just important to know, in case you didn't know, now you know. Okay, now back to the water. The biggest issue with LiquiGen and all liquid sims is to judge the speed of the water, but you cannot do it in the viewport because the performance is so ass, right? So what you're gonna do is, in the output, make sure you have the correct folder selected that you want to now make a viewport render, which is you can do under the window where your camera is, under view, so not here, but here, and then viewport render animation. And then you're gonna see that you're rendering your viewport 1 by 1, frame by frame. Actually, this makes sense to maybe hide everything, so we have just a little bit better performance. Yeah, that's better. And now you don't need to render all the way, just render, let's say 20 frames or whatever. So you just need to be able to judge the speed of the WaterSim. That's it. Okay, so in Premiere Pro, I import the clip I just rendered, and if I press play, you can see, okay, nice. Now we can see how fast the water is in our scene. In my case, this is way too fast. This just doesn't look correct, and it's impossible to judge it in LiquiGen first and then just hope it works in Blender. I think you always must do this trick in order to judge the speed, because LiquiGen also is kind of buggy sometimes with the export, with the 50 hertz and the frame stride or whatever. Make sure to always check it first, because you do not want to render everything and then it's the wrong speed, right? And you need to re-render everything. Okay, but how do you actually change the speed of this alembic? Very good question, actually. So in the liquid, inside the modifiers, you have this the cache, the sequence basically. And now we're going to do a little trick The first step is to actually look where the simulation ends. In my case, this is somewhere between 375, 374. This is the last frame of the simulation. Remember when we exported 500 frames in LiquiGen? Actually, in the end, in Blender with 25 FPS, we only have 347. So this is also kind of buggy sometimes, so whatever. So this is the last frame. You're going to remember this because we are going this override frame setting. We're going to click this, and here we are going to type 374, and then press I. Go to frame 0. We are going to make 0, so this is pretty logical. And now nothing changed because we did what it was originally the state, basically. So 0 and the last frame. So now if we create a new window and turn this into a graph editor. Now, very important, uncheck this show only selected because this is for the whole world. If you only select this liquid, you will not see the alembic data. I don't know why, super annoying. Anyway, just make sure uncheck this. And now in the water mesh, you're going to see this curve now. And this curve is just your speed, the original speed. And if you want to make this slower, all you have to do is select the last keyframe, GX, and just move it into, I don't know, 800, 900. Let's make, for example, 800. And now all you need to do is to re-render the viewport animation. Now in Premiere Pro, you can see that now this is the old simulation and this is the new simulation, which is much slower, but you also see that it is a bit more choppy because it actually just skips some frames and it doesn't interpolate new frames. That's kind of an issue, so you cannot go overboard too much. You cannot make slow-mo shots in this case. This you need to do in LiquiGen itself. In this case, like I said, this is the default. This is the default. This is with to 800, and this is just a little bit too much. So in the end, I chose something like 500. I'm pretty sure I did something like 500, but we can actually check because this is my original water mesh, and my original water mesh in this case red, it is exactly at 502. And in the next step, you will do the same thing. If you change the timing of this liquid, you would also need to change the timing of the particles, obviously. And then here you use literally the same thing I just showed you, so I'm not going to show it again. So we're going to turn on cycles now, and then we can see everything is white because we haven't applied material. So in the liquid, I'm actually going to apply my water material onto it. And let me show you how the material looks like. It is actually pretty simple because we do not any noise shenanigans or whatever, because it's like a real water simulation, right? So all you need is a principal BSDF. I turn down the color just a little bit so it's not completely bright. The roughness, we don't need to like completely go to 0, but somewhere like this. I decrease the alpha just a little bit so you can see through it. And obviously the transmission needs to be at 1. The rest I think I didn't touch. And most important, for the coloring, I'm not going to color the base color. I'm just going to use a principal volume, which is just a better way to color any types of, you know, liquid and volume stuff. Actually, let me turn on my real lighting from the scene. Now this looks much better. And with this principal volume, you can just change, you know, any kind of color you want and any density. The denser it is, the less you can see it through, and the less dense, the less influence the coloring is going to have. But we're not done with the white water actually. There's missing a crucial step because we need to add a geonodes modifier now. Because the problem is these particles, they cannot be rendered. You will see them in the viewport, but once you render them, you're not going to see them. And then you're going to freak out. But you don't need to freak out because you just need geonodes. And I already have this white water particles. And I'm going to show you how it looks. In the geonode editor, that's the complete thing. Actually, we don't need this. So what you need to do is 4 nodes: a point to vertices, a mesh to points, And here is where you set the radius. So if you set the radius, let's say to 0.1, you'll see that our projects are now huge. But we don't want that, so let's go back. So 0.01 is what worked for my in this scene. And then you need a set material node. In this case, you create a new material later. And then you can also have a bake node and then bake the whole thing just to increase performance. It's not super necessary, but you can do it if you want to. And in this case, inside the form, we can apply this white water. This will not have any influence, but this is just so we have in the shade editor, we can see it now. And this is just a principal BSDF. I think I didn't change anything about it. Yeah, it's just a principal BSDF, transmission to 0.9, alpha to 0.7. The rest literally doesn't matter probably. And then if we go back to the geometry nodes editor, it's just important that you have this white water selected in the set material. Because if you only select it here, but you do not set it here, you will not see it. So that's really important. So now the water is officially finished, and then we can turn on the rest of the scene. And then we can see everything looks pretty nice. We can also turn on our scattering, go into the camera view, disable the UI. Actually, I forgot about my cylinder. Perfect. So now our scene is basically finished. The last step is in the compositor. There's one crucial thing I added. If in the compositor I added 2 nodes, and then under the viewport shading, turn on the compositor to always or camera. In this case, doesn't matter. I just do always now. And this is the last step I did before I am rendering out the whole scene. One is a glare node, and this glare node just gives us these nice glowing highlights. This is really nice. I'm a really big fan of this glare node. Set to bloom. And then this color balance node is just for a little bit of color grading. I turn on the gain. Actually, let me just show you. So the gain is the highlights basically. You have control over the highlights. The lift is the middle tones, let's say. And the lift is the dark values. You need to just play around with it a little bit. There are a bunch of different other techniques you can use. You can also use curves and whatever. I just like to use this. Most important is that I increased in the gamma. I increased in the gain. I increased the red a little bit to counteract this insane blue from the fog. And this is how I rolled with it. And all I did now is just to render out the whole scene, and then you'll be finished. So this is now the final result of the whole thing. We can see a little bit difference in the God rays, because in the end, if you render out the God rays, they are a bit more crisp than you would think. This is why I increased the radius, if you remember that. Other than this, everything looks pretty nice. You can see that the plants are moving. And I forgot about this, I'm sorry, but I'm not gonna record it again. It's just about in Geoscatter you can have this option of turning on wind and turbulence. If you can figure out for yourself, it's not that difficult, honestly. But the most important part is that, you know, the scene is just finished. We have the camera working. We have this nice water animation. We have the light and everything. So this is the most important. So it's a really nice project, but technical on a really high level. And a lot of you were asking about a full tutorial, so here it is. And yeah, leave a comment if you'd like to see more of this type of stuff. Let me know if this was too advanced, you would like a little more easy, more step to step, or this was too long, because it's just 1 fucking hour now. But I try to make it as short as possible, but there's just so much stuff to talk about. And last thing is, I actually enabled motion blur, but not in Blender, but I did it in post in Premiere Pro. This is pretty useful for water stuff, because this makes it just a little bit more floaty and whatever with the motion blur. And yeah, so that's the whole project. Thank you guys for watching, and see you in the next one. Bye bye.